So my guest today is Bill Priestley, the owner of the Dream Job Factory, a coaching business geared around focusing dreams into careers. Using the Dream Job Blueprint, Bill helps individuals from high school age to retirement figure out that age-old question: what do you want to do with your life? He's spoken to high school and college students about identifying dream jobs and coaches mid-career professionals interested in a career change. And he's also the author of the Dream Job Blueprint ebook and online course. Bill, how the heck are you? Welcome.
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
My pleasure. So you and I both know most people are clueless about finding a job, let alone figuring out how to find a fulfilling professional life. I would just suggest people start when they're saying to themselves, I'm miserable, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. You know, all the people who went to law school and suddenly discovered they didn't want to be lawyers, and a whole bunch more. Where do they start?
Sure. Well, I think it's important to start with the fact that we're not looking for one thing. For instance, you'll hear a lot of people say things to the effect of, well, music is my passion, or sports is my passion, or business is my passion. And they look at that in terms of one thing. And I think that's the true misconception of what it is when you're starting to look for something. And you're not looking for one thing out there. Because let's say, for instance, I was doing this with a football coach one time, and I said, football isn't your passion, because I bet I can find more than one thing about the football industry that you not only dislike, but perhaps completely hate, and would never, ever want to do. For instance, field maintenance. I mean, it's part of the football industry, but you got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. Marketing is absolutely part of the football industry, but you don't want to do that, do you? And they said, no, I don't want to do that. I said, coach, is that what you want to do? Yes, I want to coach football. Okay. So we have to get a little bit more streamlined in terms of our effect of what we want to do. So we have an interest there in football. We have an ability there in coaching. And now we got to talk about, who do you want to coach? Are we talking about high school? Are we talking about college? Are we talking about pro? Are we talking about big cities, small town, Division I, Division III, all of those things? So when you start this incredible journey about trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, you're not looking for one thing. I think you're looking for three.
Three? Like what?
Yeah.
Three things. Should we stick with the football coach metaphor here?
Sure.
And we use that example? Great. So in the case of the coach, what sort of three things should they be looking for?
Well, if you identify a passion around those three things, you're looking for an interest, something that you are really intellectually interested in, something that stimulates you intellectually, something you can talk about for hours on end and not get bored. And believe me, football coaches can talk about football for hours on end and not get bored. It's just amazing how much they can actually talk about the game. But then past that, what is it that you want to do within that industry? And of course, there are many things that you can do within the football industry. Of course, you can coach, you can play, you can market, you can be sports information, you can be an athletic trainer, you can be a referee, you can be in administration. All of those things are connected to the game in some way, shape, or form. So what is it that you want to do within the context of that industry? And then, like I said before, then you're looking for, okay, who is the person that I really want to work for? And that is different depending on what that job is. So say, for instance, if we're talking about an athletic trainer is working for the players. A football coach is working for the players. An administrator, perhaps, is maybe looking at more of the bottom line. Maybe they're looking at marketing. Maybe they're looking at ticket sales. Maybe they're looking at win-loss percentage. Or they're looking at a more big picture type of thing. That's the entity that they're necessarily working for in that particular respect. So, like I said, when you're looking for the three things, you're looking for an interest. You're looking, which in this case is football. You're looking for an ability. In this case is coaching. and you're looking for an audience. In other words, the person, the idea, the person that you want to be working with or working for. And say, for instance, even if you take that down to the player, you'll notice, you can see this as well if you follow football on a wider scale. You know, the college game is geared around the team. The professional game off season is geared around the individual. For instance, we're always talking about the draft or trades or things like that. But the football player, at least at the collegiate level, is thinking about their teammates. They want to help the team. Generally speaking, the teams that go on and win Super Bowls, you can see this with the Patriots and other dynasties that have happened, they're in it for the team. The nucleus stays together. Like, you know, in baseball, the Big Red Machine stayed together and had all those great years with Johnny Bench and Joe Morgan and all those guys. So they're playing for the team. You don't want to be on a team where everyone's playing for themselves. You don't want to be on a team where someone says, like Keyshawn Johnson did many, many years ago, give me the ball, you know, that kind of thing.
There was an extra word in there.
Yeah. And I made sure I bleeped it out. But, you know, that's the entity that you want to be working for someone, because that's also the essence of the job. Your job would not exist if you don't do it for someone else, right? You are serving someone else.
It's got interest.
Mm-hmm.
We have to find specificity. And what was the third one? One more time.
You have to have an interest. You have to have an ability. So in other words, something that you do within the context of that interest. And then the audience. Who is it that you want to work with, or who is it that you want to work for?
Got it. So let's use the example that I came up with earlier. I just graduated law school. I spent my first year working for a law firm. Oh, God, this is awful. And they've spent their entire life focused on fulfilling their parents' wishes of being a lawyer. And that's the story for a lot of lawyers, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been so focused, they don't have a clue about what really interests them. So they think.
Mm-hmm.
How do we help them get that clue? What sort of work goes in at the front end to identify the areas of interest?
Well, the areas of interest really essentially boil themselves down to what is it that drives you intellectually. When you're talking about an interest, you're talking about something that, by definition, keeps your attention. You know, you are interested in it. And there are so many different things and so many different ways that you can go about this as well. For instance, the obvious thing is something that you want to be interested in, like something that draws you to it. For instance, like football or sports or things that have those positive connotations on them that you kind of want to be involved with, or things that draw you to them. And at least those would be the case with me. You also have different ways of going about it, whereas there are situations that you want to avoid. For instance, you see a problem in the world that you would like to see go away. It's a bad thing, but it's got your interest because it keeps your attention. So say, for instance, if you're looking at, you want to, I know this isn't necessarily a dated reference, but if you want to get rid of AIDS in Africa, that's a big interest. You know, if you talk about that, that always gets your attention when it comes up, or you want to do something about racial inequality, or you want to do something about climate change, or you want to do something about a host of any other issues that get your attention. Then it gets your attention. Then you're interested in it. The next question is, what can you do to affect that situation positively? Another way, kind of veering off of that, is answering the question, what are you scared of? Because what scares you,
I love that one.
Because what scares you gets your attention. Guess what? If there's a snake in the room, and I'm petrified of snakes, but if there's a snake in the room, guess what? It's got my attention. Okay. That's going to happen. Nothing else is going to matter at that particular point in time. So my next issue is, all right, how do I alleviate the situation? Same thing with whatever it is that anyone might be scared of. You know, if you've got kids, there's a lot in the world to be scared of that you can help sort of alleviate. And that's, of course, a lot of companies are in that business of trying to make the world safer. So that's what we're talking about, is finding something that gets your attention. That's the first thing that we want to go about doing when we're at a point where we think, oh gosh, there's nothing out there for me. Well, yeah, there is, and there's more than you think there is when you take a look at the world,
And
and
it's
especially
interesting.
in the case when you're talking about a lawyer. If we are talking about lawyers, you're talking about a person that has been through a lot of school, a lot of training. They know probably a good bit about the world. And you'll notice that in the higher profile areas of administration, you'll often find lawyers, certainly in politics, certainly in high levels of corporations. You will find people who have maybe not necessarily passing the bar type lawyer, but you have people that have gone, they've gotten their MBA, they've done all that book work, and they know a little bit more about the strategicness of what they have to do to make a company or an organization better.
When I work with people, I start off by helping them identify what it is about what they're doing now they don't like.
Yeah.
And quantify that so that this way, as they start to examine other things, they can use that as a benchmark to determine what they don't want to be doing in the next role. Because most people find it pretty easy to dismiss or reject or turn down, or they know the negatives real easily. The positive ones are harder. So I tend to start them off with, what don't you like about being a lawyer? And from there, once they have that quantified and we start working on the interests, the things that float their boat, get them a little interested, I send them off on informational conversations with people who may be doing that kind of work.
Sure.
So
Sure.
this way,
That's more towards the tail end of what I do. But yeah, definitely. Once you figure out those three things, then obviously talk to someone who's got the job, and let's see if that really does flip your bill.
and it's funny, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I do that earlier than you do. I'm going to be curious to see what you do differently. So I send them off on informational conversations so they can hear the reality of what it's like to work in the profession, because sometimes the lawyer recreates being a lawyer by looking at being an accountant, for example.
Yeah.
The same issues with repetitive work, hellish schedules or what have you, get involved in the next profession. So before they go off for additional training, I want them to understand what it is really required, what the reality is.
Sure.
Now, you speak in terms of ability being the next thing. So I'm curious about that. Tell me how you help people identify their ability and what ability means to you in the context of this transition.
Right. So, okay. So the first thing is obviously in figuring out an interest, there's a binary relationship there. Either you like it or you don't like it. You can set a bar there as high as you want to. In other words, if we create a list of interests, then we can say, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, pick out the ones that are an 8 or higher. And those are the ones that are going to cross the bar essentially. When it comes to abilities, there are 3 different benchmarks that you have to pass in order to make this actually work. Number 1, you've got to be able to do it. Obviously, if you want to, do it as a career, you've got to be able to do it in the very plainest sense of the word. The benchmark that I would use is, can you do it well enough to get paid for it? In other words, you can ask me, Bill, do you play the piano? Yeah, I play the piano. I have an ability to play the piano, but nobody's going to pay me to play the piano. Okay. So you've got that there. It's first off, but there are others obviously out there that if you ask them the same question, they may be, classically trained and they have the ability to be paid for that there as well. So that's the first benchmark. The second benchmark is, do you want to do it? Say, for instance, we talked about football coaching or other aspects of the football industry. Field maintenance is something that football coaches don't want to do. They just don't want to do it. So the question there is, again, another binary situation. You have, do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? And if you want to do it, then we continue on to, can you do it for someone else? And 99 times out of 100, the answer to that question is yes. Unless you're talking about, say, for instance, television being your interest and watching it being your ability. That doesn't feed anybody else necessarily. So we're talking about doing it for someone else. to the point and doing it well enough to be paid. So those are at least the three criteria of where we need to start. Now, how do we figure that out as far as the individual is concerned? Now we have to get into the hardest part, what I think the hardest part is of the entire process, which is basically self-discovery in terms of figuring out. Because one of the really interesting things about life that I think is intriguing is that we tend to think of ability as something that is difficult. Like if I say you have an ability to do this, that means whatever it is that I think you can do, I think is difficult. It's difficult for me. However, you may think that it's easy because you can do it. You know, if you have a problem where you have A plus B equals, and someone walks up to it and goes, well, the answer is C, and they move on. Someone else approaches and goes, A plus B is banana. And that's not right. And they're just guessing and who knows what's going on. And they say, well, that person got it, so they must have an ability to do this. Therefore, this must be hard. And the other person thinks, well, no, that's easy. Everybody should be able to do that. So it's much tougher in that respect to try and figure out what we're good at, because chances are we usually think of what we're good at as second knowledge. I mean, or as just, common experience. You look at a problem, you go, oh, well, switch this to this and this to this, and you're done, and that's it. And we don't think twice about it. Whereas someone else may think that's really, really difficult. And you think, oh, I can never do that. So now we have to look at what comes to you easily. That's the first thing.
A lot of those things are acquired skills. And my favorite example of this, and the one I use, is toilet training. Every young child struggles with the concept of toilet training and or using the toilet, and the parents are all worried, oh, is the kid ever going to learn how to use the bathroom? I don't know about you, but I'm at an age where people start to worry about it, older individuals and their ability to use the toilet, but that's a different conversation. But
sure,
there's a point where it becomes second nature, and practice and the fear is overcome. And suddenly the kid can do it, and the parents go, Hosanna! I don't have to step around all those diapers with me all the time. Yay! And for a lot of you folks, there are things you're going to need to learn along the way that are going to help you. You may have an affinity for it, but you just don't know how yet. That always begs, because a lot of coaches I've spoken to over the years, for the show, often we'll talk about, okay, this is your passion, go off and do it. And we'll turn around and say, okay, I've got a mortgage. And that's a variable in there. It impacts what someone can afford to do. And thus confronting the mortgage, the financials, the responsibility you have to a wife, husband, or partner, the kids, the dog, whomever, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, cats too.
Yes.
Responsibility of cats. I don't want to ignore the cat lovers. I had lots of cats in the past. But the idea becomes taking that into account, and whether you can do it now, how you can do it now, so that you don't outstrip your expectations is one of the things I work with. So that, we're talking about a process, but I always bring in, the reality to it is, is your wife or husband on board?
Yeah.
If you have to go to school, is that something that you can do, given that you've got the wife, husband, partner, kids, and you're going to have to do some study too, like what's reasonable. So with ability, there's always the idea of learning, practicality, and stuff along those lines. So once we're looking at ability, I heard you talking about some of the natural stuff that people who have expertise and experiences have, and some of the stuff that people don't have yet. It's acquired. When you're working with people, how do you encourage them to just go off and do it? How do you help them overcome, oh, I don't have enough time for this, I've got a job, and all the other laments that people have?
The biggest motivational thing that and I use this myself because unfortunately I've had to face mortality twice in my life, is, all right, let's say we're talking to someone who's 45 years old. Imagine your life in 30 years or 35 years. If you look back, would you regret if you didn't have this opportunity again? Would you do it? I mean, would you do it if you knew that you would regret it 35 years from now? And that usually is enough motivation where it's like, if I really wanted it, I would do it. There's a process a little bit later on in what I do that we look at, because generally speaking, the end result out of this is going to be a list of dream jobs. It's going to have, I mean, it could be anywhere from 5 to 30. Generally, we try to get it between 10 and 15, but they're usually broken down. I break them down into 3 different subcategories. The first is dream jobs that you want to do once. In other words, the things that you would give you the great amount of satisfaction if you just did it once, you'd be okay. You know, and those are eventually the things that you just call on your bucket list. Is I just want to do this once. You know, that's it. You know, and like people will say, well, you know what, I'd really like to be a baker. Well, once you figure out how hard baking is on a day-to-day basis, you know, once you've done it once, you know, that's going to pretty much fill your cup. That's going to be it. So that's on your bucket list, maybe. And it's something that maybe you just want to do, you know, in your own home, or something that you can do, you know, however you get the opportunity to do it, maybe through a not-for-profit, maybe through a volunteer, that kind of thing. So then the second category would be something that you want to do between 5 and 200 times over the course of the rest of your life. And I would call those hobbies, because you're not completely committed to those things that you think you want to do. But, you know, it's something like, oh, you know, I mean, I really love, what's a good example? I really love playing golf. Well, all right, go play golf. And you can play golf and make money at it. You know, even if you're just, you know, Joe Schmo off the street, or, you know, whatever, you can still, you know, make a little money every 2 or 3 weeks if you just want to go out and do that. If you want to, you know, work with kids, be a teacher, you know, it's not something that you want to do all the time, because you don't want to do the grading and the discipline and all of that stuff. But, you know, that's something that fills your cup. You know, you get to go in, you get to influence kids for a while, and then you get to step back. And, you know, for those that understand the illusion, be like a grandparent, you know, step in for a little bit, then step back, you know, that kind of thing. But then there are the jobs that you want to do every day, that just are going to bring you back every single day. And what I've learned is that most of the time, those jobs seem to take on what I would call the affect of a cathedral architect. In other words, cathedral architects are some of the most interesting and just dedicated people on the earth, because when they design a cathedral, they won't see the final product. It'll take 100 years to build. It's not going to, you know, for instance, the cathedral in Barcelona is just now getting finished after being started 100 years ago. Washington Cathedral up in DC, I think, took 85 years to build. The architects are long gone from the original drawings of that building. So when you take on a cause that is much bigger than yourself, that you know perhaps you are not going to solve within your lifetime, that is at least something that you can say. If someone wants to try and cure cancer, that's a huge goal. I mean, that is a big, huge goal, but it is something that very well may not be solved within our lifetime. It could be. But if you commit to that kind of goal, and you want to do it, and you want to see it done, maybe because you knew someone who had cancer that you wanted to perhaps save, any bit of data, any bit of information, any bit of knowledge that you can help procure along the way will be a way to continue the fight to end cancer in the world. You know, that's a very noble cause there as well. So when you have a cause that's bigger than yourself, that's usually a very easy way to identify something that you're willing to do for the rest of your life. Now, when it comes to, say, I won't say smaller dreams, but if you want to do something on smaller scales, you know, that gives you the opportunity to do something, maybe complete it, and then now what? What happens when the dream is realized? Now we got to start over. Now we got to do it again. And so then we go back to step one and go, okay, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? Who do you want to work for? That kind of thing. But as far as you know, motivation, mortality is a powerful thing. And so I would often say, if it meant it today, if you could only do it today, would you do it? Or if you would regret it if you didn't do it today, 30 years from now, when you don't have the ability to do it, that's usually going to be the good flip of the coin as to whether or not, yeah, I'm really interested in this, or no, I don't think I have the commitment to do it.
I remember a friend of mine many years ago, was a mathematician. His father and uncle were popular composers in the 1920s. A lot of very well-known hits. Mm-hmm. And when his uncle, who was the survivor of the songwriting duo, finally died, I remember sitting with my friend as he said, I don't want to die with the music inside of me.
Bingo. There you go. There you go.
And that was the awareness that he had. He was doing good work, but there was something more important that he wanted to get out of himself and give to the world. And whether that's in the form of family, which is a perfectly valid place to, in my mind, to put your energies into to ensure legacy is passed on, or something in the more public sphere. The idea is taking steps to actualize the things where the dreams are and finding those dreams.
And we're talking about things in terms of the idea of giving a chance to something that, well, to go back to the original illusion, if you talk about something that stimulates you intellectually, that's an intellectual push. If you've read Daniel Pink's book Drive, there are 3 types of motivation that he talks about. And the last of those 3 is intrinsic motivation, things that we would do for no reason other than to benefit someone else or to benefit ourselves. And so when you talk about something that's intellectually stimulating, it means you're taking the information in because you want to. And one of the reasons that we do that is because we want to be autonomy. We want autonomy of the situation. We want to be able to think about the situation in the terms in which we want to do it. That's one of the reasons that kids have a lot of trouble in school, is because they want to think about things the way they want to think about them. And the teacher will say, well, you really need to think about it this way so you can understand the next concept, and so on and so forth. So when you get to abilities, the great draw is mastery. For instance, if you got a puzzle in front of you, if you solve the puzzle, you're not going to get paid for it. You're not going to, there's not something that's coming back to you. You want to be able to master the puzzle. And then the third thing that we do is we do things for purpose. For instance, if there's a wreck on the side of the road, do you stop? Do you get out? Do you see if everybody's okay? Do you call 911? Again, those are things that have no benefit to you personally necessarily, but they have benefit in terms of you using yourself for the greater good. So those 3 things, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, if you can put those 3 things together, again, something that stimulates you intellectually, something that rewards you physically, and something that fulfills you emotionally and spiritually, that is a job, that is a thing that I find people find incredible difficulty turning away from if they get themselves involved in such a situation.
I'm curious how you deal with people's fear. Because fear about actually taking action comes up. Because we all know there's a risk in making a change.
Oh, yeah.
How do you work with people to overcome their fears?
Well, the first step is looking at it as, all right, if you've got no other chance to do this, would you do it? And again, we're talking about mortality a little bit, but that's moving that direction. If that doesn't motivate them to that point, I feel like you've got to find the other reason why you're doing this. What is the reason that you want to do it? And does that reason have any sort of gravitas or pull within your life? Because if it doesn't, you're not going to move. If it's not going to create for you a situation that you want to be in, because people will move in situations from a modality of scarcity to a modality of opportunity. So say, for instance, the example I like to give is person getting married. So if a person gets married, they're viewing their life as not an opportunity, or I'll say let me back up. Other people would view that person as they're moving from an area of opportunity, in other words, the ability to date many other people, to an opportunity of scarcity, which is, well, you're only going to date one person for the rest of your life. You know, how boring could that possibly be? Whereas you're looking at it from an opportunity of scarcity. In other words, I don't want to do that, to an area of opportunity, whereas I get to spend one deep relationship with one person that I really admire for the rest of my life. So the question is, what's going to get me to move and recognize that what I'm in is an area of scarcity to an area of opportunity? It's kind of like why we do that. You get into the psychology of all of this in terms of say, for instance, why we go and buy that car, why we want to buy that house. Well, we're viewing that as our car isn't good enough. Our car is not what we want. Therefore, we're moving to an opportunity, therefore, to get the better car or get the better house or do that. And that's an easy decision to make because we're moving to an area that we want to go to. When you look at a job, you're changing environments, but let's realize if this is where you want to go, let's find the opportunity. And if the opportunity, therefore, isn't great enough for you to think of it as an area of opportunity, then you're not going to move on. Then you're not going to do it. Then let's move on. Let's move on to something else, because ultimately you're going to be the decider in whether or not you're going to jump through the hoop. And if you don't want to jump through the hoop, I can't make you.
Agreed. And folks, I'll just simply say there's a price that we pay for every decision that we make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I said, if you find yourself in a moment of scarcity, but moving to a moment of opportunity, good on you. If everyone else doesn't see that, that's bad on them. I mean, you have to listen to yourself in that certain situations, especially if you're moving into situations that's better for you, that's better for your family, that's better for, all of those things that you talked about, then that's good on you. But if you're doing it because maybe someone else told you to, or you're doing it because, this is quote unquote the right thing to do, then I get worried. I want people to go in a direction where they feel comfortable. And if they don't feel like, I shouldn't say comfortable. I want them to be in a situation where they feel challenged to move ahead. If they want to move ahead, if they're intrinsically motivated to move ahead, that's where I want them to go. If they don't feel that, then let's not go there. And let's drop it, as quick as we can.
What haven't I asked you about so far that we should cover in today's show?
That's a good question.
If anything, for that matter.
Yeah. Well, there's in terms of what I do, there's that way that I talked about where we figure out an interest, an ability, and an audience, and you're trying to put that together. The other way to do it is to do it backwards. In other words, look at the world and try and find the person that you want to help. And then apply yourself and say, all right, what can I do? What do I know, my interest? What can I do, my ability, that can affect that person? I had this, the way that I came about that particular thing was, I had a kid, I was doing a youth conference one time, and a young man walked up to me and he said, we were talking about people that you wanted to work with or work for. And some kids were joking, and one of the kids, about a 16-year-old boy, just had his leg propped up against the wall. He was leaning back. And he said, I want to work for girls. And that became a kind of bit of a running joke. And someone else walked up to me and afterward, after the group dispersed, and he tapped me on my shoulder and said, I would have said, I wanted to work for my mom. And I said, why do you want to work for your mom? And he said, because, and I couldn't tell necessarily if this had just happened or if this was an ongoing thing where he had just gotten some bad news, but his mother was sick, and he just wanted to help her. He wanted to figure out a way to help her. And so, right, well, let's figure this out. What is it that you want? How do you want to help them? And how can we help them? And so through the course of about a 5-minute conversation, I learned that his father was in the financial arena, and that he kind of liked what his dad did. And so we talked, and he said, well, why don't you become a fundraiser for, an organization that could help your mom? And his eyes lit up and his jaw dropped. And I don't know how that story ends, but it begins with him running out of the building to try and find his dad so he can try and help his mom. So that's in a way that you can start with an audience, start with a person, because he's not only helping his mother, he's helping every woman in that situation, if that's specific enough. He's helping every person in that situation by utilizing his own strengths, his own interests, his own ability to try and rid her of whatever that disease was that was afflicting her. So you can go at it forwards, you can go at it backwards, and it still works.
Bill, this has been beautiful. How can people find out more about you and the work that you do?
Well, you can check us out on the web at thedreamjobfactory.com. A better way to do it, though, is to go through Facebook, where we've got a closed Facebook group. All you got to do is fill out the questions. If you go there to the Dream Job Blueprint, just search for the Dream Job Blueprint on Facebook, and you can join that group there. And then, of course, we're also on Twitter at Dream Job Factory, and on Instagram as well as the Dream Job Factory there as well. You can also email me through the site if you'd like to, where we also handle coaching opportunities. And you can also check out the online course and the ebook, which is available there too.
Beautiful. And folks, we'll be back soon with more. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did and you're watching on YouTube, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, do something that communicates that this is worthwhile for you. Leave a comment. And I'll just simply say, if you're interested in working with me, I've got a ton of great information at my site, which is thebiggamehunter.us. Go there, go to the blog, go exploring. There'll be a lot there to help you. And I'll just say, if this isn't the right time for you to do that, put the address in your phone. Again, that's thebiggamehunter.us. Use my name, Jeff Altman, so that way you can find me, find the site at a time in the future where you might be interested. For one-on-one coaching at the site, you can schedule time for a free discovery call or schedule time to go right into coaching. I'd love to help you. And connect with me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/the Big Game Hunter. Hope you have a terrific day, and most importantly, be great. Take care.